Welcome to PSY 316, study session 7. Why do we forget? Introduction. How much do you remember of what you learned over the past academic year? How many of your high school classmates could you name right now? How many times a week do you forget appointments, chores, and other details of everyday life? Before you groan in self-disgust, take heart. You are entirely normal. We all forget in an orderly fashion and according to a number of well-established principles. This lecture explains why we forget things. Objectives. At the end of this lecture, you should be able to 1. Explain why we all forget things, and 2. Discuss different ways we forget things. Pretest. 1. What is repression in forgetting? 2. What is decay in memory? Content. The pioneer memory researcher Hermann Ebbinghaus, 1913, gave us a picture of the curve of forgetting, which shows that forgetting is very rapid at first and then slowed down markedly. After Ebbinghaus had learned a list of nonsense syllables, he forgot them in an orderly was and quietly rapidly. Just 20 minutes after having learned 13 syllables well enough to recite them twice, in order without a mistake, he forgot about 40% of what he had learned, and by the end of the first hour, he remembered only 33, 1/3%. Over the next few days, additional forgetting took place at much slower pace, so that 6 days later, he remembered 25%, and 1 month later, he still remembered about 20%. Ebbinghaus felt that the slowness of this forgetting strongly suggested that it would have taken a very long time to forget the series entirely. When Ebbinghaus rehearsed the list 30 additional times, immediately after learning it, he remembered the syllables much better, showing that extra time spent overlearning or studying material that you want to remember can often pay off. Eventually, however, the effect of overlearning decreases, and so overlearning needs to be done within reason. Apparently, we forget for a number of different reasons. Each of the following theories probably gives us at least a partial answer to the question, why do we forget? The complete answer, however, is unknown. Motivated forgetting. Repression. Sometimes we forget material in long-term memory because not remembering seems to provide some personal benefit. First, you forget the name of someone you don't like or the dentist appointment you don't want to keep. You repress, block from consciousness memories that are sad, embarrassing, or painful. Or you glorify your past, bringing your memories into line with an ideal picture you would like to have of yourself. Repression is an unconscious process. It is triggered by our need to protect ourselves against anxiety that we would feel if particular memories were retrieved. For example, Freud says that we do not remember the feeling of sexual attraction we once had for our parents of the other sex because memory of those early sexual feelings would produce anxiety. We unconsciously repress those anxiety-producing experiences. Decay of the memory trace. The basic question about most other unmotivated forgetting is whether we forget simply because a memory deteriorates or because even though a memory is sharp, possibly for as long as we live, we can't get at it to retrieve it. Some influential theorists, such as Atkinson and Shiffrin, 1968, and Tuvin, 1977, maintain that we lose material from short-term memory because of the decay of an engram, a memory trace engraved upon the nervous system after learning has taken place. However, anything stored in long-term memory stays there forever, and forgetting of the information is due to difficulty in retrieval. Other researchers take strong issue with this point of view, claiming that there is little basis for the widespread belief in permanence of long-term memories. Theorists who maintain that there is a memory trace and that it is subject to decay believe that it will persist when used but will eventually disappear if it is not used. Poor perception. Sometimes your perception may have been too weak for something to make much of an impression in the first place. This may come out because of external conditions, noise, darkness, or some other circumstances that interferes with observation. If, for example, you saw a man in a moving car, at least 60 feet away from you, who was visible only for the time it took the car to travel 50 or 60 feet, it will be hard to remember what the man looked like because you never got a good look at him. Poor perception may also be due to some quality of the observer. You might be distracted, you might be under stress, or you might not be paying attention because you don't think a particular item is terribly significant. This becomes a problem when bystanders who were not paying close adequate attention are suddenly called upon to testify about a crime, an accident, or some other event that caught them by surprise. Inability to rehearse. Sometimes a memory decays because we don't have the opportunity to rehearse what we want to remember. If you look up a phone number and you are prevented from going over it in your head, you may not be able to remember it long enough to make your call, and we almost certainly lose it right afterward. But this applies only to short-term memory. Once something has been stored in long-term memory, you don't have to keep rehearsing it. Interference. A different theory of forgetting is that the reason we forget is not decay, but interference. Other information learned earlier or later interferes with our memory. Let's consider the two kinds of interference. Proactive interference. This describes a situation in which information that you have already learned interferes with your ability to remember new information. The prefix pro means before the interfering task is learned, before you learned the task on which you are tested. For example, when you run into a woman you knew when she was single, who then took her husband's last name after marriage. Even though you have learned her married assumed surname, you are up to think of her, the name you first learned, rather than the one you just learned about her later. If you remember her name at all, the principle of proactive interference suggests that you would remember a person's name more easily if you had to learn only one name. Retroactive interference. Information that we learn later causes a kind of barrier that interferes with our ability to remember material learned previously. The prefix retro means backward. The interfering task, learned after you learned the task on which you are interested, exerts a backward influence. The new material takes over, obliterating the old, even if we learned it well. In studies of retroactive interference, The experimental group learns material A and then B, and then recalls A. The control group is not exposed to B at all. In this experiment, too, the control group remembers the material better, indicating that the experimental group's attention to new material is blocking the memory of the old material. Failure of retrieval. Have you ever seen someone you usually see at the beach or the tennis court in a situation where you are both formally dressed and have a terrible time figuring out who that familiar looking person could be? When one of you finally makes the connection, he or she is sure to say, "Oh, I didn't recognize you with this type of dress." That kind of forgetting is cue-dependent forgetting. The inability to remember information because appropriate retrieval clues are not present. The cue-dependent forgetting. The memory trace is there, but we cannot get at it, which shows that normal people often have difficulty retrieving memories, just as amnesiacs do. Our environment is different. The clues we depend on for retrieval are no longer present, and the memory is therefore inaccessible. In the example above, you are away from the environment where you usually see this person, and the person is dressed differently. In other words, the clues for recognition are not there. Many contemporary psychologists feel that we often can't get at our long-term memories because we don't have appropriate clues to call them up, rather than because there is decay or interference. Summary. The lecture has explained different ways in which we forget things. These ways include repression, failure of retrieval, interference, decay of the memory trace. Post-test. 1. How does interference affect memory? 2. How does failure of retrieval affect memory? End of study session 7. Thank you.